Good morning and buenos dias. I am Abu Sha'b and welcome back for another lesson in Puerto Rican expressions. This morning I want to talk a little bit about Puerto Rican history and Puerto Rico's relationship with the United States. While many Americans are aware that the Puerto Rican people are United States citizens and Puerto Rico is a United States territory, many people are unclear about the nature of this relationship. Let me start off by giving a brief history of the island. The first people to inhabit Puerto Rico were indigenous peoples that migrated up from the coast of South America, basically island hopping from modern Venezuela through the Lesser Antilles until they arrived to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is the smallest island of the four Greater Antilles. The four Greater Antilles are Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, which houses the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and Puerto Rico. At the time of the arrival of the Spanish, the two dominant indigenous groups of the area were the Taíno, which are recognized as the indigenous group of Puerto Rico, and the Caribs, who gave their name to the Caribbean Sea. As the Spanish established themselves here in the Caribbean and in America in general, many families migrated from Spain and established agriculture introducing many plants and animals from Europe and Africa, such as sugarcane, bananas, started plantation farming, brought many slaves over from Africa. Thus, the Puerto Rican culture was born. The Puerto Rican culture, the Puerto Rican people, pride themselves in stemming from three groups: the indigenous peoples, the Taínos, the Spanish, and the African slaves. However, the contribution from the indigenous group might be a little bit less than the other two groups, as the Spanish systematically exterminated these peoples. In fact, famous Puerto Rican governor Juan Ponce de Leon ordered the extermination of all indigenous persons in, I believe the year was 1558. This is the same Juan Ponce de Leon who later went looking for the Fountain of Youth in Florida. As the Spanish continued to establish themselves in the Americas and started to exploit the resources of the American continent, especially in Mexico and Peru, Puerto Rico was reduced to a stopping point for the treasure ships on their way from America back to Spain. Eventually, it became nothing more than a warehouse for livestock and slaves. This resulted in poverty for many of the inhabitants of Puerto Rico, and many were unhappy with Spanish rule. This continued on for centuries. This continued on until 1898, when the United States, sensing Spain's weakening and faltering as an empire, took advantage of the situation and provoked a war with Spain, where they easily defeated the Spanish in a nearly bloodless and quick Spanish-American War of 1898. Upon defeating the Spanish, the Americans found themselves in possession of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba, the Philippines, Guam, and perhaps some other territories that I'm not aware of. Out of all these territories, only Puerto Rico and Guam remain U.S. possessions to this day. The others have become independent nations for the most part. In the year, the Americans didn't do much to alleviate the poverty of the Puerto Rican people either. In fact, quite the opposite. Many American companies came down here exploiting the situation for gain in the sugar industry, which was blossoming about that time here in the Caribbean. In 1917, the United States Congress granted citizenship to the Puerto Rican people. This could have been a political move just to enable them to be drafted into military service. I'm not sure about that, but it's possible. I have to research that fact. Puerto Rico's current political situation was formed in 1952 when its actual constitution was put into vigor. The legal name for Puerto Rico under this political entity is the Free Associated State of Puerto Rico. In Spanish, it's Estado Libre Asociado de Puerto Rico. We often say El ELA, using the letters, an acronym, El ELA, Estado Libre Asociado, ELA. Contrary to popular belief, here in Puerto Rico, we do not vote for the President of the United States or any other office in the United States. We vote for our autonomous government here in Puerto Rico. We vote for the governor of Puerto Rico, who represents one of two political parties, and we vote for our mayor. Puerto Rico is divided into 78 towns or municipalities, which are called municipios in Spanish, And every town has a mayor, and this mayor has quite a bit of power and responsibility as he administrates a lot of federal and state fundings. When I say state fundings, I mean from the government of the Free Associated State of Puerto Rico, the state government. The federal government is the United States government, obviously. We don't vote in any elections for anything in the United States, except we do vote in primaries. However, personally, I didn't find it to make much sense to vote in a primary for an election that I can't vote in the final election for. However, many people do. We just had the Democratic primaries here. I believe Hillary won. I'm not even sure about that. Excuse me. In Washington, we have one representative. However, he does not have a vote in the House. He's called the Resident Commission, the Commission Resident, Resident Comisionado, the Commissioned Resident, it would be in English. Excuse me. However, he's just a high-powered lobbyist, and we do have a lot of influence in the House, and he does get a lot of federal funding channeled down to this island. There are a lot of great federal programs that other territories that share a similar condition politically, like the Virgin Islands right over to the east of me, and Guam, somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, also share. However, Puerto Rico, because of its large population in the United States, both of people of Puerto Rican ethnicity who are not necessarily from Puerto Rico, and lately we're experiencing other waves of migration to the United States from Puerto Rico due to the languishing economy here in Puerto Rico. In the 1950s, as many people are aware, many companies from New York came down here actively recruiting workers for the garment industry that was flourishing at the time. I've seen pictures where they came down here with cargo planes and just filled them up with lawn chairs and loaded up Puerto Ricans to go work in those factories up in New York. This resulted in the establishing of those communities that are now famous in the Bronx and Spanish Harlem, and that whole culture, that subculture of the New Yorkers, as we call them here in Puerto Rican Spanish. However, the later migrations, especially the recent migrations since 2008, since the economic crisis, have all been basically headed towards Orlando, Florida, which has become the new mecca for Puerto Rican immigration. In fact, I've often joked that even now Mickey Mouse speaks Puerto Rican Spanish. Well, I hope that clears up any misunderstandings anybody might have had about the nature of Puerto Rico and its political relationship with the United States. Thank you so much for viewing. Have a very good day.